Good morning, everyone, and welcome to McGill. We're super happy to have you with us today for our session on budgeting and expenses. So first and foremost, I wanted to congratulate you all on your acceptance to McGill. It's an accomplishment, and I hope you took a moment to celebrate that. So congratulations. So today's session is going to be giving you practical tools to manage your finances wisely so you can focus on what really matters and make the most of your time here at McGill. That's why we're here to help you so that you feel supported. So I'm Carolyn, and this is my colleague Alex. And today's presentation is going to be on budgeting and expense planning. So just to start, I have some housekeeping I want to go through. So you'll notice that the webinar is being recorded, and that's so that we can share it later for people who couldn't join. We'll also be posting the PDF with clickable links. So that should be helpful. Secondly, your microphones are currently turned off because we're hoping to keep it muted so that we have better sound quality and we can reduce feedback. So to that end, we've enabled the Q&A function so that you can post your questions, and we'd be happy if you post them as you go along. Alex and I are going to try to read them and address them as we go through. If we don't answer them, often it's because the content is coming up, and if not, we both have time at the end for the Q&A. So I hope that that's helpful. Alex, I don't know if you want to put up my slide on who's campus engagement before we...
Oh, yes. There we go.
We launch into the meat of the presentation.
Yes.
So,
sorry, there you go.
Like I said, I'm Carolyn. I can just go without it being up. I'm Carolyn. I'm a student advisor in Campus Life and Engagement, CLAY for short. And we're here at CLAY to help you build a sense of belonging and connections during your time at McGill and within the Montreal community. So we do this first by helping you prepare for your arrival at McGill and connect you with the resources you need along the way, such as this. You've seen us in your inbox on Mondays. You're going to keep receiving those emails from us through the summer. Those emails try to guide you through deadlines and important preparations and offer you information and interactive sessions that are useful to answer all the questions you have before you arrive. We have a super great team, and we can be reached individually for one-on-one appointments to help you navigate supports and resources in your first year and beyond. And we also have a team of Ask McGill student navigators that are present on campus. They answer phone calls, emails, and you're going to see them on campus in August and sometimes present in buildings through the year. We can also help you explore peer support through our mentorship programs where we pair students with upper year students so that they can help guide you from a student perspective. And we also put on lots of webinars, so and our biggest event, which is orientation. So we hope to see you there for that. So now, Alex, so the meat of the presentation, I hand it off to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Caroline, for the intro. And just one quick little thing: when Caroline was talking about that, she turned off the sound for everyone, so to reduce feedback. She was talking about audio feedback, like so nothing buzzes. We love your feedback. If you have any questions or anything like that, please do ask those questions in the Q&A. Okay, just to be clear. Okay, we want as much engagement and participation as you guys are up for. All right. Awesome. Well, so let's get started with today's session. So Montreal, also known as Tiohtià:ke, is located on unceded indigenous lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation. So to have a more complete understanding about North America and the different indigenous land claims and historical land rights, I'd highly encourage you to have a look at nativeland.ca. It's a really interesting and eye-opening website if you haven't seen it before. All right, so with that little land acknowledgement out of the way, so today we will be talking about budgeting. Now, the really interesting thing with budgeting is that most of you, whether you've lived on your own or, this is the very first time that you're moving out, and you're living on your own, you probably already know many of the basics of budgeting, or at least the theory behind it, right? So it's really not that complicated. Therefore, some of the things that I will say might seem very obvious and very kind of, well, obviously, Alex, I've already been doing this for X number of years, right? So some of you that have lived by yourself. But there are other little things here and there that sometimes if you're just tweaking something that you're already doing, you're tweaking it slightly by knowing where to find, let's say, some additional information, or maybe using a product that might be a little bit less expensive than a different product that might save you, $5, $10 a month. You're like, "Ah, that's not a lot." Yes, but if you think about it, right? $5 a month, that's $60 at the end of the year. If you were to walk in the street and find $60 laying on the floor, would you not pick it up, right? So that's the way to think about even these small savings. Think about, well, just a dollar. It's like, yes, but it adds up. Now, obviously, if it's $1 and this is the only time in your life that you're ever going to be purchasing this one item, that's not a huge savings, right? That's not going to be making you a millionaire or anything like that. But again, sometimes it's in the small items, in the small expenses that we don't bother tracking, that we're actually losing a lot more than what we think. Um, so one little last philosophical statement before I go to the content of the slide today. Oh, and actually one last thing too, I meant to tell you, today's session is basically an hour and a half, right? So I'll do my best to finish below that timeline. But then if you have additional questions, and you will see there's kind of different subtopics in budgeting, and I'll also the last 3 slides or 4 slides or so, I'm also kind of covering a little bit about how credit scores work and how credit cards work, just because everything is sort of intertwined and it'll make more sense once we get there. So if you have other questions about some of those topics that we're covering faster near the end, I'm more than happy to stick around after the presentations, and you guys can ask me as many questions as you want. One quick little thing actually at the very beginning here, you also have my email on the very first slide here. So alex.gavrila@affiliate.mcgill.ca. So feel free to send me an email. I'm more than happy to answer questions, whether you're sending me an email tomorrow or you're sending me an email 5 months from now. Typically I get back to people within 24 hours. Okay, so you should be able to send me an email, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have about those things, whatever they may be. All right, so as I said, so my little tangent here is that if you think about it, right, initially when we're young, right, we have a lot of time ahead of us, right? So as a result, people exchange their time for money, essentially. Obviously, when you're still in school, you're learning your skills, you're becoming a better individual in terms of your knowledge, your abilities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what you end up doing, whether working part-time to support your studies, whether working in a lab as part of your studies, et cetera, you essentially trade some of your time, yes, to learn those things, but also to get paid for your time. And then as you're getting older, you're graduating, your time becomes more valuable, therefore, and your experience grows, therefore people are willing to pay you more and more and more as you're getting older. Now, it gets to a point where your time is so valuable that some of the tips and tricks we'll talk about today might seem pointless, because there's not a lot of, it doesn't make a lot of sense to spend 2 hours researching what would be the best product if, let's say, you're getting to a point where you're making, let's say, $200-300 an hour, right? So trying to save $5 while researching a product for an hour makes little sense at that point in time. But until you get to the point where your time is so valuable and you're making so much more money than that you could be saving, it makes a lot more sense initially to spend a bit more time to make better purchasing decisions. This doesn't mean that as you're getting older, as you're getting paid more, you should just buy the most expensive thing and not bother researching whatever it is that you're buying. But I'm just saying some of these things will shift as you're getting older. Okay, so just an important thing to keep in mind. It doesn't mean you always have to use some of these, and some of these approaches that I'll talk about may be a bit less relevant right now, but will definitely be more relevant once you graduate and get a real job, right? So there's a little bit of everything for everyone in today's sessions is what I'm trying to say. Okay, all right. So let's look at essentially at the different types of expenses that students, as well as pretty much anyone else really around, will have, right? So your largest expense as a percentage of your monthly budget for most people tends to be housing, okay? So unless you're making a lot of money and your income is so large that you're basically reinvesting a lot of it in your business, in stocks and whatever bonds and whatever it is that you're investing in real estate, typically for most people, housing tends to be the largest expense by far, okay? And unfortunately in Canada, housing, both rentals as well, and especially purchasing a condo or especially a house, have gotten exponentially more expensive over the last 10, 15, 20 years, right? Now, in most countries around the world, real estate tends to go up over long periods of time. There's sometimes a few years of decline, but typically speaking, housing costs have increased exponentially. Now, and we'll see this one out when I'll show you a sample budget in like 3 slides from now. But there are multiple different websites that you can use to try to find sort of a better a better rental arrangement, shall we say, or better rental prices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is just one example. Oh, and by the way, Caroline, do let me know if you like. Again, you can share the slides maybe with the students. Again, it's up to you if you want to share them right now or a bit later on in the session. So I will leave that up to you. Just because sometimes some students want
You
to.
mean the links? You want me to pop the
No,
links in?
yeah, so you can pop the links, or again, the slides themselves. I don't mind if they
Slides.
already have access to the slides right now
Okay,
as well.
sure. I'll pop
Yeah.
them in there. Sorry,
So
thank you.
entirely up to you. Yeah. Yeah, because again, usually I pop the links as we go in chat, but again, this year we're doing it a little bit different, so I don't have the chat available to me here on the side. Perfect. Right, so this year I'm just going to show you what this looks like. Again, this is definitely not the only website, but I'm just using one example because I didn't want to include 50 different examples here. So rentseeker.ca. Now, the reason I like this particular website, it doesn't necessarily have the lowest prices, although sometimes it'll have reasonable prices, but it has a decent co-location option, and you'll have different settings here to look for it. Many other websites exist. If you're looking at, let's say, a realtor.ca, that's another one that you can look for rentals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously you can find many places also on Facebook Marketplace, on Kijiji. The problem with those last two that I mentioned is the probability that you might find a scam listing increases quite a bit, right? I'm not saying that every single listing on Kijiji is a scam. And again, I have those links in the next few slides as well. You can find plenty of good things there. It's just when it comes to a rental, I'll be very careful, especially if you're not on location, right? So a few little important things when you're looking at a rental, very, very important to actually go and visit the place in person. I know some of you might not have moved to Montreal yet, right? Because sometimes some of the students that attend these sessions are still in a different province, in a different country, on a different continent, right? So as a result, international students especially are more likely to get scammed by these. Number one, you might not be familiar with what are sort of more reputable websites and what are sort of the processes. And again, I have in a couple of slides, I have a few links talking about the rules and regulations surrounding leasing and renting apartments and what are your rights and obligations. How many months worth of down payment can a landlord ask from you, right? Because there's some landlords will take advantage of the fact that international students might not be familiar with how it works in Montreal in Canada, and might say, oh, okay, well, you have to give me 5 months rental deposit. Okay, that's they're not allowed to do that. Okay, that's way too much. Okay. So I'll show you the subsection of the Quebec government website that talks about the rules and regulations surrounding landlords. What are some of your responsibilities as a tenant, and what are some of your rights, and what are some of the things that a landlord can ask for? Okay. So that's an important little section that we'll talk about very, very shortly. Anyway, so this is rentseeker.ca is a good website. Realtor.ca is another really good one for that. Okay, but there are many other ones, right? Now, Kijiji and Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. Personally, I prefer using them typically for buying used items. For example, if you like to play tennis once in a while, but you're not like a world-class athlete, do you really need to spend $200-300 on a brand new tennis racket, or could you just buy a used racket that maybe has been used 10 times or 50 times, whatever, right? And buy it for like $20 instead of paying $200 for it. So for those types of things, you're a lot less likely to get scammed on those websites. Whereas when it comes to a rental, especially if you're not able to visit in person, I'm not saying this happens all the time, but there have been cases where basically people have been shown a virtual apartment, and it ends up being that it wasn't basically the person listing it. It wasn't their apartment to list to begin with, right? They might have grabbed that legitimate listing that used to exist on Kijiji or some other website, and they cloned it, and they're pretending that they're the landlord. Okay, so because of this, I would say just be careful. Just because, again, rents tend to be quite high. So if you're scammed out of 1 or 2 months worth of rent, number one, not only does that pose a very big logistical issue for you when you're moving, but you're also going to have issues of having lost X number of dollars, 2,000, 5,000, whatever amount that particular individual might have asked you. So please be careful. It happens rarely, but it can happen, and the likelihood increases more with those types of websites. You can, however, find some of the better deals on those websites as well. So that's the thing you have to watch out for. So again, Craigslist, Kijiji and Facebook Marketplace. You can find rentals, legitimate rentals, but I would definitely make sure that you primarily only use them if you can get, actually visit it in person and, ask them for the documentation and everything else up front, not just believing them. Oh, well, I'll just walk you through. I'll just FaceTime you, or I'll just show you the apartment via WhatsApp or what have you. Okay, it's just an important little thing to keep in mind. Then the second, oh, and by the way, and percentage-wise, right, housing tends to typically make up about 30 to 35% of people's expenses. Okay, well, at least that's the recommended amount, right? Because housing has gotten so expensive, in some cases, I've seen this increase all the way up to 50%. This is not recommended, okay? If you're looking at what the experts are suggesting, typically you do not want to spend more than 35% of your income on housing. The reason for that is because it's shown that, given how much the average person earns versus spends, if your housing starts costing substantially more than 35, now it doesn't mean if it's like 36, 37%, oh my God, you're going to go bankrupt, you're going to lose, you're going to lose everything, you're not going to be able to make ends meet. It's just that typically we want to, optimize it for this 30 to 35%. Obviously, if you're in a situation where maybe you can get, you don't mind having a couple of roommates or what have you, or maybe you find a really good deal on a rental somewhere, and you're able to pull this even lower percentage wise, then that's amazing, right? Just be very careful once you start getting into the 45, 50+% range. You're sort of you're flirting with danger, as they might say. Okay, so be careful is what I would say there. Okay, now your second largest expense, if you're an international student, would be tuition, typically speaking. Okay, now obviously if you're a Quebec student, then typically food will probably bump into second place and tuition might be in third. Well, again, it depends. Now depending on what country you're coming from, I'd highly encourage you to have a look at this differential fee waiver. There are multiple resources on the McGill website, and I actually have a slide coming up that half of the slides, if not more, talks about the differential fee waiver, where you can find more information about it, both on the McGill website as well as on the Government of Quebec website. But I also give you sort of the main link over here to the McGill website. So this talks about how the differential fee waiver works, what are the eligibility criteria, what's the deadline, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and what exactly it gives you. Now, this hasn't been updated because, again, if you're an international student, you can apply for this in typically in the fall. So again, here, this gives us still the data for the current academic year, but basically during the summer, this will be updated with the 2025-2026 information, right? So essentially, if you're able to qualify for this, right, you're essentially saving between $15,000 and $17,000 on tuition, which I would say is substantial. For most people, that's a pretty good savings if you think about it, right? It's basically having like a part-time job, right? Because essentially what it does, it converts your international student tuition into the equivalent of the Quebec tuition, right? So it lowers it by that much, okay? So I'd highly encourage you to have a look at this subsection of the McGill website. And again, this will be mentioned in various other webinars during the fall semester. I personally also give a webinar series called Financial Skills. There's 10 different up to 10 different webinars. Not every single webinar is necessarily offered. They're 2-hour-long webinars. You can attend as many or as few as you want. They're free to attend. I have a link to them at the very end of today's session. So they talk about investing, about housing, about how to secure funding, although there's a bunch of other amazing resources surrounding funding from GPS. So that's McGill, some that's graduate and postdoctoral studies. They have some really, really good resources on their website. And there's many other resources at McGill that you can find that talk about upcoming sponsorships and scholarships and fellowships. And that's my other thing over here, right? You also might consider looking at, especially those of you that are international students, looking at this subsection of the GPS website, okay? So they talk about a large number of both the very big scholarship/fellowship programs, such as the Quebec ones, right, as well as the national ones. But they also will talk about they will mention some of these smaller ones as well. And some of them, depending on the country you're from, you might have certain specific scholarships, for example, if you're from Mexico or if you're from China, there will be specific scholarships that will be available to you. Okay. So have a look at these subsections of the McGill website. They can be quite useful because, again, yes, tuition is an expense, but if you can get a sponsorships, fellowship, scholarship, etc., or the differential fee waiver, and again, with the differential fee waiver, there's a limit in terms of how many of these will be available for masters versus PhD students for each for different countries. So different countries will have different types of agreements with Quebec. Again, in Canada, education is a provincial jurisdiction issue. So the provinces decide exactly how education works. So when it comes to the differential fee waiver, that's a Quebec agreement with different countries. Okay. Again, if you want to learn more about this, I have a slide coming up in a little bit, so you can look at all the details. Now, I also tend to talk quite a bit, so do feel free if you have any questions to post them in the Q&A, and Caroline will summarize those for me as we're switching sections, and I can pause for a little bit over there. Okay, and the reason I talk so much while I'm not showing you a lot of information on the slide is most of what I'm telling you right now is showing up 1 or 2 slides later. So what we do then to those slides, I maybe show you a couple of the links. It's just those slides are much more text heavy. I hate text on slides. It's just this is sort of my way of dealing with me presenting or talking to you. Then you can listen to me. You can focus on me, but then you don't have to scribble, super fast and write down 50 different things because they show up on a slide or 2 later. Okay, so that's my way of proceeding. I probably should have mentioned that at the beginning. All right. So yeah, so again, tuition tends to be the second largest expense, but you can definitely reduce that either by securing some funding or reducing the costs. Again, then food becomes typically the third largest expense. And as I said, this can be second largest if you're a Quebec student, or again, those of you that qualify, you're international student and qualify for differential fee waiver, food may very well jump into second place here. Obviously, it depends on a number of, when it comes to food, it depends on a number of criteria as well. For example, if you have certain food restrictions due to either religious beliefs or due to dietary requirements, because you might be allergic or you might be vegan, etc. Depending on what your food restrictions are, the more food restrictions you have, the more expensive it might actually get. And unfortunately, while in Canada we've been trying to sort of localize food growth a little bit more in recent years, especially since the pandemic, we're still not quite at the place yet where we can grow all our food year round. So especially in the winter, you will notice, especially those of you that are vegan, you will notice a substantial spike in the price of veggies and fruits. Okay, it's just the reality. Just that's the way it goes. And shall we say, with our lovely friends down south, more recently Canadians have started on purpose not buying U.S. items because when your much bigger neighbor down south keeps on talking about incorporating you into their country, a lot of people don't take very kindly to that for some weird reason. Who knows? We're Canadians, I guess. Okay, but the point is, now, if on top of that, people also try to not buy as many U.S. products, that again further complicates the supply chain. Hopefully, we'll have enough time by next winter to arrange that a little bit, because a lot of, especially a lot of our fruits and veg in the winter, especially, come from the U.S. or historically have come from the U.S. Again, right now we see a bit of a shift. Now, for when it comes to saving on food, I have 2 slides on that showing you different approaches and different apps, and as well as different coupons that you can actually use and get, and we'll talk about that. Okay, there's one way to do this by making sure to get a credit card that gives you cashback rewards, either that you can use on anything else or specifically grocery rewards. Some credit cards in Canada will allow you to get 2-3%, sometimes even more than that, of whatever it is that you're buying, getting those credits that you can then use to purchase food from certain retailers, for example. So obviously, that's a way for them to make sure that you use that credit card more. So make sure that if you do get a credit card, and we'll talk more about that when we get to that section, that you're use it responsibly. But as long as you use it responsibly, if you're going to be paying for something anyway, you might as well pay with a credit card that either gives you an extended warranty on, let's say, if you're buying a brand new laptop, right? They might give you an extra warranty of an extra year or 2, right, in case of damage or loss or what have you. Or at the very least, gives you some form of cashback rewards, either money at the end of the month or at the end of the year, or some form of points that you can then convert into purchasing items, whether it's food, whether it's electronics, whatever it is, right? Right. Just again, the key thing there is to make sure that whatever it is that you're using, those credit cards that give you those rewards, to realize that that's a bit of a game to them, right? They're giving you that, not because they're lovely people, but because they want you to use the credit card more. So it's okay to use those credit cards. Those are credit cards that I use all the time. Just make sure that the incentive is not driving your expenses, to a higher level than what you meant to be spending. Okay, as long as you're spending on what you meant to be spending anyway, please do use those credit cards. They also boost your credit score if you're using them properly. Again, we'll talk about that in the last 2 slides of today's session. Right, so that's an important thing to do, but just make sure not to get over indebted. Very important. Okay, so we'll talk about some of those apps very shortly. Now, obviously, for most people, your fourth largest ongoing expense will be your telecom expenses. So that's your cell phone bill and your home internet. Right? These days, I think we'll all agree that it's pretty much impossible to lead a regular life, especially when you're in university. If you also need to work on projects and work from home sometimes, or maybe in the evening, etc., without having access to internet. I think that's kind of a given, right? Now, Canada, unfortunately, has some of the most expensive both cell phone plans as well as home internet plans. They're getting a little bit better. Okay, so things are improving. But you might, especially those of you coming from sort of honestly, even Europe, right? Which is, you would argue that most things are relatively expensive in Europe, but internet is not one of them in most places, and cell phone plans. But especially if you're coming from, let's say, Latin America, if you're coming from Africa or Asia, where the income level in most countries, not all of them, in those regions tend to be substantially lower. Obviously, you cannot charge someone $50, $100 a month for an internet plan, because a lot of people don't earn that much in a month, or they would have to spend like 80% of their income on that, right? So, but even in Europe, where income levels are quite high, or quite comparable, if not higher than in Canada in many countries, you will get a €5, €10 cell phone plan. And they're quite common in many countries, not in every single one of them. But for example, in France, I have a few friends that live in France, and recently I was on I did a small trip around a few countries around Europe a couple of weeks ago, and they were telling me that yes, their cell phone plan is €7, and they basically have 100 gigs, or at least this particular friend has 100 gigs of data for €7 plus unlimited minutes in an entire Eurozone. So I'd love 100 gigs per month for essentially €7 would be about like $10 or so. That'd be amazing. No, they cost a lot more than that. Even the cheap plans, which again, I'll talk about some of there's a couple of websites that you can actually use to compare and contrast cell phone and home internet plans, that you can definitely find the least expensive ones. And I'll talk to you about a few little ways to also save more on those. But even the cheapest one in Canada, getting anywhere near that is, 50, 60, 100 gigs might cost you at the very least $25 to $35 bare minimum, and that's a good plan. There are still plans out there that will charge you like $80 for something like that. Okay, and again, no, that's and these here. This is just two older articles here talking about why cell phone plans are so expensive in Canada, et cetera, and they give you some examples of international plans over here. So that's just for your reference. Okay. Then again, the fifth most highest expense, again, annualized on a monthly basis, right, would be clothing. Now, why? Obviously, you're not buying. Most people don't necessarily buy clothing every single month, but you might buy a few in a row for a few months, especially if you're just moving to Canada and you're coming from a country where shall we say the temperature is more stable. Okay, so this year, this is literally last year. Last year, I gave this presentation on June 4th. Now, this is literally the forecast from last year. Okay, so last year we had on June 4th. Okay, it was at 3 p.m. 31 degrees, and also you'll learn very quickly, since Montreal is an island, the humidity factor does change the way you will perceive the heat. And if you're coming from a country, especially I have a lot of friends that are from the Middle East. If you're coming from a Middle Eastern country, yes, they have much higher temperatures, but there's no humidex there in most cases, right? Unless you're living right off the coast. Okay. I have a friend from Morocco, for example. He's telling me, like, as soon as you're getting inland, it might be 39, 45, but it's 39, 45. That's what it is. You never get these weird spikes. Now, this is not an extreme here, right? August tends to be the warmest slash most humid month in Montreal. So while you don't get many of these days, you might get, let's say, roughly a week or so, maybe 10 days if you're unlucky one year, where the temperature will be between 31 and 35, but feels like 40 to 45, 46. It's never a fun month. Again, if you're not used to that sort of, muggy, super hot, and on some days like there's no wind, and it feels like you're entering, a sauna essentially. Um, Anyway, there's very few of those days. But here's the crazy thing. You're like, it's okay. I'll deal with that, Alex. It's fine. Okay. But Montreal also gets about a week or so of minus 40 in the winter. Okay. Last couple of years, it hasn't been so bad. It's been a little bit warmer. But you will get typically mid-January to late January is typically the coldest week or 2 week period that we get. And in the winter, there's wind. Okay. And on days that are windy, the wind chill factor is real. Trust me, you're going to get a minus 25 with no wind. That's bearable. That's fine. That's not a big deal. But minus 31 with wind chill minus 42 or thereabouts, not fun. Luckily, again, only a handful of days that happen in the year. But you can understand what I'm saying, that you will spend quite a bit more on clothing than you might in a more temperate zone where year round you can more or less wear the same thing. That's definitely not the case in Montreal, okay? Unless you happen to live, in one of the larger buildings that is connected to the Montreal Underground. And by the way, the Montreal Underground will probably become your best friend in the winter when you want to go shopping and you're not used to the crazy Montreal minus 30 degrees that we have. Again, luckily, not too many days are that bad, okay? But there are some. So in some cases, I've known some students that basically lived in some of the high rises. They would take the Montreal Underground, and then they basically just pop up like across the street from McGill or thereabouts, and then just run quickly to their class if they had something, if they had a class, let's say at Des Hotels, for instance. But most people will typically, not only have like a 50-meter walk, will have a much longer walk. As a result, you probably need a decent jacket, decent boots, and those of you that haven't been in person in Montreal, um, Peel Street tends to be very steep near the end. So if you happen to be a student that you're doing your PhD maybe or master's um, in essentially pharmacology, or I mean also I guess law, because you have to kind of walk up and down Peel. They're pretty good at clearing the snow and picking up the snow, but on some early morning days in winter, when you have a massive snowstorm or sometimes a mix of snow and ice in like February, March, that street, if you don't have good boots, becomes kind of a slip and slide, and you don't want to be sliding down Peel. Trust me. And I
Yes,
like
they use
Caroline.
salt.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
they
they
do.
use salt for traction, but sometimes
Yeah,
they don't salt it, and it's a skating rink on an angle,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And they've on some years they will also add kind of literally rope on next to because there's these metal fences on the side, so they will also add rope just in case. But again,
Law, medicine, education. This
yes,
is you guys up the
yeah.
hill.
um, but yeah, so that's the fun part. A little trick, but again, please only use this little trick if you are actually in pharmacology, or you may be going to the Bellini, the Cancer Research Center. You can enter through McIntyre, which is flat, and then just take the elevator up one floor that way, or two floors, I guess. That way you don't have to worry about walking up the biggest incline. But again, only if you're in those programs. Please don't go around otherwise. All right. So long story short, you will need to spend probably a little bit more on clothing, just because you need different types of clothing, right? And speaking of and sort of a related topic here, those of you that choose to live a bit further away, and especially if you already have a family or plan on starting a family while you're still at McGill, at some point, again, Montreal has a pretty good infrastructure when it comes to, it can always get better, but it's pretty good in terms of public transit. Like we have a metro, we have a lot of buses. There's a lot of buses. Honestly, the buses show up, especially if you're going on the main bus corridors. There's a bus every few minutes, essentially, right? So that like every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, every 2 minutes in some cases, there's a lot of buses, right? So most people have no issues getting around with a bus. But again, especially if you have small children and you need to drop them off at daycare and you weren't able to secure a spot, let's say at the McGill daycare, because McGill has a couple of daycares that are typically reserved for postdocs and professors, but you might sometimes, grad students might be able to get in if there's space. And there's some daycares also around McGill, but in some cases you might be literally stuck with the dilemma of, well, okay, there's a lot of buses, but I don't have the time to like jump three different buses to drop my kid off and then go back on the bus and then go to McGill. So some of you might need to buy a car in some cases, and same thing. That's a bit more expensive than in other places, just because again, winter tires are a must in Montreal. There's no that honestly it gets dangerous if you don't have winter tires. Not only can you get a fine between December 15th and March 15th, you need winter tires. Like legally, it's mandatory, right? It's not optional. All seasons don't cut it in Montreal, okay? But you also, you have to deal with storage of the tires, et cetera, if you're in a building. So again, a few logistics that you may not have to necessarily think about in other places, okay? So think of that
And
as
it's
clothing
hard
for
to
your car.
park
Yeah.
in a snowbank.
Oh
Parking in a
yes. Oh yes.
snowbank, not easy.
Yeah.
So you might need to
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
pay for indoor parking,
Oh
right?
yes. And I was gonna say, and parking becomes quite expensive. So if you can avoid it, honestly, parking would be like, not getting a car can save you quite a bit of money. But again, in some cases, again, I know the realistic logistics. Sometimes you have to get one. But as parking, not only is it expensive, but it might not be the most obvious one to find. Again, there's not enough parking on McGill campus, even the paid one. There's definitely not enough to accommodate everyone that might want a parking spot. So then you have to go to sort of the tall buildings nearby. Some of them will offer monthly parking, but again, that can be quite expensive. I've seen $150 to $100 $250 per month, right, in parking, just to park your car, so your car sits there for 8 hours a day or for however long you're at McGill. Okay, so again, another thing to keep in mind. So ideally, you're either close enough to McGill that you can walk it, or at least take the metro or the bus for a couple of stops. Or if you're coming from further away, again, the metro system is quite efficient, quite effective. Even if you're, let's say, 10 plus stops, and again, we have a pretty reasonable light rail system for local rail, so that works quite well as well. But again, little things to keep in mind. Now, obviously, entertainment, I will give you some tips and tricks in terms of how to save on your entertainment needs. Again, that can vary substantially depending on what you're interested in. Again, Montreal has quite a few museums. There's many different cultural events happening year round. During the summer, there's a lot of different festivals. We have the F1 race coming up in a week and a bit. So there's, actually next weekend, I think. There's a lot of things for everyone, essentially, is what I'm saying. But again, be careful, because again, that can add up quite quickly, right? There's also a lot of things that you can do essentially for free or close to free, and we'll talk about that as well. Okay. And then transportation tends to be, again, depending on how much you're spending on entertainment, transportation might be up here or it could be down there. And we'll talk about some of your options, and I'll list some of those afterwards. All right. So this is sort of your broad overview. And now for each one of these, I have a few slides for you. Okay. So far, so good in terms of any questions that, relating to the overview. Because again, we'll address every single one of these in greater detail. All right, since Carolyn is not saying anything, I'll take it that everything is fine. Perfect, awesome. All right, and last little thing.
And
here.
everybody can react, so I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up.
Oh yes. I'm noticing those too. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That helps Alex know that you're still there.
Yeah, awesome. So this here, the FCAC is the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. That's a regulatory sort of arm's length agency from the federal government. And they have sort of a dual mandate. One of their mandates is to oversee part of the financial industry and making sure that they're providing the proper tools and information. And if they're advertising a certain product or service, that product or service matches with the advertisement, right? But the other mandate is that they provide freely available educational resources about many things. So a lot of the information that you will see today summarized on my slides is coming from them. Another very useful thing that they do provide, and I cover this in greater detail in my financial skills series, again, available in the winter and fall semesters. You can sign up for as many or as few of those webinars as you want. Again, they're free to do. I don't have the dates yet for the winter, but again, I do have the link to the entire series on my very last slide, so you can check it out there. But they also provide this very neat little handbook in PDF format. So here you go. So it comes in English, and there's also the French link, because obviously in Canada, it's a bilingual country. As a result, you have both the French and the English versions of this. So again, today we'll be talking about budgeting, and I'll pick and choose a few little things that they mention here in the debt, the credit and debt management section. Okay. But essentially, that's a lot more. There's a lot more information here for you to like a few additional tips and tricks in terms of how to save some money on this, that, and the other thing. A lot of this stuff I will be covering already, but it's still it's still very useful to do. One thing that I want you to do after the session, not right now, but after the webinar, is go to page 3 essentially, and basically fill out page 3 and 4 from memory. Okay, and the reason I want you to do this is because this essentially basically asks you, what is your monthly budget, right? It's just from memory. Okay, what are your different sources of income, and what are your main expenses? And here, honestly, this data is quite old at this point, so this no longer really. I would say they need to update this. As you can see here, it's from 2017, but this is still on their website, Canada.ca. That's the Government of Canada website. So this data is a bit outdated at this point. So income has increased quite a bit since then. Expenses have increased even more, so that's a bit of an issue, but that's a different story for a different time. But this just gives you an idea in terms of how much would the typical person in those fields work after paying for taxes and the various other deductions. So this is basically their net income, right, after they pay taxes and all those pension contributions and all those things, but employment insurance and so on and so forth. Okay. And then basically, yeah, so mention what is your income here, and then you will be talking about what are your expenses. Again, I want you to do this from memory, right? And then what I want you to do is I will show you a freely available PDF that you can do to actually, it's a spreadsheet that you can use to create a budget and to track a budget. And then use that spreadsheet to track your budget for an entire month. Then compare that spreadsheet and actually look at how you spend your money. Compare it to this summary here that you had your best guess in terms of how much money you're going to be spending on XYZ. So the reason I want you to do this is because then I guarantee you there will be at least a couple of sections that you will have expected to spend X amount, and you probably are spending substantially more than X. If you're careful with where you're spending your money, there might be even 1 or 2 sections where you overestimate how much you're going to spend and you actually end up spending less, right? Again, it is entirely up to you how you spend your money. I'm not trying to tell you don't spend money, right? Spend it if you need to. It's just that the more you're spending on one item, and especially if that item can be purchased for less or could be skipped this time around because it's not an essential item, well, the less money you then have for maybe something that might be essential. Okay, so we'll talk about the importance of basically having at least a 3-month emergency savings set aside, and a few of those things as well. And as I mentioned before, you also have that same thing also available in French to you. So it's over here. So there you go. All right. Okay, so how do you stay on track when it comes to budgeting? Well, again, number one, to make sure that you're not spending more money than what you're planning on. The key thing is to be aware of what you're spending your money on, right? It sounds very obvious. As I said, some of these things might sound very obvious, but literally, how can you make sure that you're doing well in terms of your budget if you're not tracking your expenses? It might sound tedious, but again, I want you to do this at least for a month. The experts typically recommend to do it for 3 months, but let's be honest here, okay? How many of you on January 1st told yourself, okay, this year I'm going to try to get more in shape, right? And then everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people sign up to go to the gym or start being all like, okay, I'm starting this year on the right foot, and I'm going to be more active, and I'm going to stop sitting in front of a computer for so long, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then by the 3rd week of January, you're like, oh my God, okay, I'm just too busy. I have to do this, and there's an exam coming up, and I have to TA this class, and I have to do this other thing. And then that initial drive sort of fiddles away, right? So this is not to say that some people don't actually change their lives for the better and don't get more in shape or do whatever it is that they're trying to do. But think of a budget as sort of your financial fitness test, okay? Start with a month and do it right. that's better than aiming for, I'm going to track my expenses for the next 3-6 months. Chances are, if you've never tracked them before, it'll start feeling tedious. You might skip a few times. Oh, I'm going to update my spreadsheet like next time I have the time. And all of a sudden, no, there's like 5 different things that you haven't added. You're like, oh, hold on, how much did I spend on this? I'm going to check it tomorrow, and so on and so forth. You see what I mean? Same thing, like if you're planning on doing 10 push-ups a day, that's super easy, right? But then if you skip 30 days and now to catch up, you have to do 300 push-ups today when you haven't done any in the last 2 weeks, that's not going to be that easy anymore. Okay, same idea, a little bit at a time, right? So track your expenses would be your number one thing. Now, luckily, there's more and more freely available apps that allow you to do this. Again, I'll show you a spreadsheet that you can use from the FCAC, from the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, that you can use to do that for yourself. Again, a bunch of different apps online. Just be careful if you are downloading any apps that are supposed to help you with budgeting. Some apps purportedly say that, oh, we're going to help you manage your expenses in real time and track your budget in real time. But for us to be able to do this, you have to provide us with your login information to your bank account. You have to provide us with your login information to your credit card. Again, I'm not saying those are scams, right? There are some that do that literally just to steal your credit card information and banking information. But even the ones that aren't scams, if you're reading the terms and conditions of your credit card, of your banking account, of your, if you have any investment accounts, they say that if you're sharing your login information with third parties, if there's any unauthorized access, that's on you, right? Because you're willingly giving that login information to a third party, right? Now, the app itself, again, they might not be the scammers just trying to steal your information, but what if their website gets hacked, right? So there's many issues there. So I would say I'd probably skip using those more convenient, quote unquote, apps that require you to log in, just because when they require you to log in, if it's a third party, you're waiving that zero liability issue, right? Your credit card, provided that you've taken reasonable steps to ensure that the credit card is not going to be used by a third party, by some scammer, as long as you're taking reasonable steps not to share your login information, not to flash your credit card info on a TikTok or some crazy thing like that, 99% of the time, your bank, your financial institution will cover any misuse of the card. That, let's say someone steals your card and makes a purchase or two, right? In 99% of cases, that will be refunded to you. However, if they can show that you've basically willingly shared that login information with third parties, and then that third party gets hacked or that third party was a scam, well, sorry, in that case, you're on the hook for now owing that amount of money back to the credit card company. Whether it's $50 or $5,000, well, good luck, So that's an important thing to keep in mind. There's a lot of different tools, but again, I personally would stay away from the ones requiring the active monitoring stuff. Okay, it's the most convenient one because then you literally don't have to do anything; everything is automated. But the trade-off, I think personally, is a bit too high, at least on my end. Again, up to you guys to make that decision. Okay. Now, also important to figure out what you can spend less on whenever that's a possibility, and negotiate prices down a little bit. Now, I'll talk about those two strategies in a second. Now, the reason I'm showing you this really, and believe it or not, this was a real advertisement, and this was apparently one of the most popular advertisements from Marlboro in the 1950s. Now, obviously, this would not fly. This advertisement would not fly today. Like using babies to advertise cigarettes to women, number one, a bit sexist. Number two, really weird, right? But apparently this was very, very popular in 1950s. So what's the point of this little picture here? Well, the point is, back in those days, advertisers had a much harder time persuading and convincing people that they should be using a product, even when that product was detrimental to your health and didn't really have any good health benefits that I personally can think of, right? Tell me a good health benefit of smoking. None, like none that I can think of. Okay. So, however, we're no longer living in the 1950s. Today, especially if you're someone that uses social media to some extent, you will see very targeted ads because everything is tracked. Google tracks you, Amazon tracks you, Facebook tracks you, WhatsApp tracks you, Instagram tracks you, everything tracks you, right? So as a result, the types of ads that you get are much more likely to elicit a response. And especially, there's been multiple studies done that people are about 75 to 80% more likely to purchase an item if they know that a friend of theirs that they trust purchased the same item. So you might have noticed this has been a thing for the last 5-6 years. Facebook these days, every single time one of your friends goes to a location, as long as they share that location with you, they'll tell, and you happen to be in the vicinity, the Facebook app will tell you, oh, your friend was at this restaurant, or your friend rated this restaurant well, or oh, your friend just bought this other item that you might be looking at, kind of validating, giving you that social proof that people that you think are good and probably they're your friends. So as a result, you'd expect to value, most people would probably value their friend's opinion. It's like, hey, your friend thought this bubble tea was better than the other bubble tea over there at the, or maybe this hotel was better than that hotel. So it significantly increases the likelihood that you will be making that booking, that you will be buying that item. Okay. So my point is, these days, advertising is much more likely to actually change and impact your spending patterns than older advertising, which was, again, very much more kind of, was very much a broad approach. Okay, we'll put this ad, and maybe 5% of the population will find this ad relevant, but we can just buy that one bill, like we can just rent out that billboard for X amount of time. That's pretty much it. Or we can take out this newspaper ad for that one time. There was no way back in the day to customize it specifically for women that have babies, right? These days, based on what you're purchasing, Walmart, these days, basically, they will be able to tell you, and again, I've removed, because I had a few more slides here. I removed them from a few semesters ago, and I used to mention this example. But Walmart, even about 10 years ago, was able to send specific advertisements to women that were pregnant, even before the women knew that they were pregnant, based on their shopping patterns. So if you keep on buying, using a credit card or a debit card, so you're identifiable, and they're, as a result, they also know your birth date, and you're like, okay, well, this is a young woman aged, let's say, 25 to 30, and she's starting to buy these products. Our research shows that among the millions of customers that buy those products, that happen to be women in that same age range, 80% of them are pregnant when they buy those particular items. Okay? And they might not necessarily be items that you might necessarily link directly to pregnancy. But it's a very weird thing where basically the websites that you're visiting, the stores that you're purchasing items on, whether those stores are online or in person, brick and mortar stores, they will know more information about you sometimes than even you yourself are aware of, which is very creepy in a way and interesting in another way, depending on your take on it. Okay. So then how can we, given how easily you're bombarded with all of this information, how can we perhaps save a little bit of money instead of, spending all of that and kind of falling victim to these ads? Well, here's one website that a lot of people love to hate. So Amazon obviously is the world's largest retailer, and in the US at least, around Christmas time, regardless of how many people shop online at all the other stores, Amazon still makes up about 80% of online shopping around Christmas time in the US. Okay, I don't have Canadian data, but I doubt it's much different than the US. So that's a huge chunk of the online purchasing business, right? So as a result, you will find a lot of things on Amazon that you can probably buy somewhere else for a bit more. Now, here's a little website that you might find interesting. Okay. So it is camelcamelcamel.com. Now, this website, what it does, it tracks prices on Amazon. Okay. Again, usually this is the point where I'll ask people to give me a product. But here, Carolyn, maybe you can tell me a product, or if anyone puts it in chat, tell me a product to look up on Amazon real quick.
Rollerblades.
Rollerblades. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so now you get a whole bunch of different rollerblades, right? And obviously, I'm sure, the one that costs $180 versus the one that costs $55, there's probably a quality difference in some of them. Other times, it's just the brand, right? Okay, so let's say, okay, here you go. These ones. Oh, look, that looks like a good deal. Again, I've never heard of this particular brand before, so obviously you can look for a specific brand. But hey, look, they're 30% off, right? 69.99 instead of 99.99. That's what it tells us. Okay, cool. So let's click on it. Yes, this is the specific one is for boys and girls. So obviously these are probably too small for you guys, but just as an example, okay. But basically they're telling us that these are on sale. Is that true? Well, okay. All we have to do is go to that listing, copy that in here, and then hit search. Okay, so in this particular case, it shows okay 119. This one's 116. Okay, so okay, it's been around for a while. So yeah, sometimes you get something like this where I guess if it doesn't have enough data, well, again, there's a lot of ratings. Honestly, sometimes when I see 3,300 ratings with a product that has this many stars from an unknown brand, I become a bit suspicious, especially when you're sort of seeing this and it doesn't quite match that. Let's just say that people have been known to sort of fake some of those reviews. So now, in a weird way, this website also helps you to figure out whether the reviews are more or less legit, because usually when a review is legit, you will also see prices that fluctuate, right? The prices of items that have legitimately been on the platform for a while will fluctuate a little bit more than this. So again, I'd be careful with that one. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad price, but yeah. Let's see another one. Again, this is also for kids.
Maybe like printer cartridges, something that a student might need.
Yes. Okay.
Maybe rollerblades wasn't the same.
Okay. No, but you see here, but at least you see this one does what I was expecting you to do. Okay. You see this sort of fluctuation. Now the sale, you see the sales are not huge, but you have these massive spikes. So definitely don't buy it if it happens to be in one of those massive spikes. Okay. Now, the cool thing with the website itself, too, is that you can add a price watch. Okay. So, okay, very small addendum here. I'd highly encourage you to get a separate email address that I consider a junk email address. Okay. In my professional opinion, people should have 4 email addresses. One is your professional email. That's your McGill email, or whoever your employer is, right? So that would be McGill would be your student employee, your student/employee email account, right? Then your personal email, that can be a Gmail account, that can be whatever email account that you want, that you're communicating with your friends, family, etc., right? You might also use that email to maybe send an application for a job for an employer. Make sure that one actually has your name. It's not like Sparkle Unicorn 72 or something like that. That's not a professional email that you want to be sending emails to a future employer from, right? Then the third one would be a secure email. There are plenty of encrypted email services for free out there. My personal favorite is Proton Mail. Okay, so that's proton.me. Okay. They also have a free VPN that you can use without having to pay anything. So I highly encourage you to get this proton.me, get a free account there. They're located in Switzerland, and Switzerland has some of the best personal identity protection laws on the planet, right? They only give you, I think, 500 megs or 500. Yeah, I think it's either 500 megs or 1 gig of storage. So it's a very small storage, depending on the standard is 500 megs, and then if you use it for a certain amount of time, or sometimes you get promotions where it doubles your storage. But again, use this email only when you're only for, let's say, your banking information, for your government accounts, whenever you're creating an account to log into your government website to check your social insurance, whatever it is. To see what are the benefits that you're getting when you're filing your taxes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So even though it's only half a gig or up to a gig for free, if you want more, you have to pay for it. Unless you're getting tens of emails from your bank every single day, that's more than enough. You see what I mean? And then obviously erase the emails that are no longer relevant. If there's some promotion that expired 3 months ago, there's no point in keeping that with a ton of different images in your storage. Okay. So that would be the secure one, would be your third one. And the last one is what I call your junk email. So if you created an email account that was sparkleunicorn72@gmail.com when you were younger, cool. That becomes your junk mail at this point. Okay. Now, what I call junk mail, I'm basically saying use that email, not necessarily so that you never check it, but more and more these days when you go shopping, people will ask you, oh, what's your email address, right? So that we can send you promotions. And some of those promotions are great because you might get you might get like some really good coupons. But I don't want them to, I don't want to share with them my personal information, right? And not because I don't trust the specific retailer, although sometimes that's an issue too. But let's say they're 100% above board. What if they get hacked? There are multiple hacks happening on an hourly basis of many different retailers, and then your personal information gets also shared. So as a result, if you're using the same email to log into your banking account and into your government account to file your taxes and into your McGill account and into your whatever, right? You're using all the same email. Well, then if it gets compromised in one place and the more places have it, the more likely you are to start getting spammed, the more likely one of them is to get compromised and then sold on the dark web to info brokers that then basically send it to a whole bunch of scammers essentially. Okay. So one of the easiest ways to avoid being scammed is to have this sort of four email system. Okay, so again, sorry for the slight delay or addendum here, but again, I think it's really important to make sure that you're not getting scammed. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with this website. I use it all the time, but I do not use my McGill email account. I do not use my personal email account, and I for sure will never ever use my secure email account on this. Right? This is the place where I would enter that junk email account. So I still have access to it. I still see the notifications, but it has nothing to do, and ideally it has nothing to do with your actual name, right? It's not Alex Gavrila at yahoo.ca or gmail.com or Hotmail or whatever, right? It's something completely different. Okay, so you can add that price watch, and basically when you're adding the price watch, you can literally tell it, well, when these drop to, you see the lowest price it's ever been at, it was 42.14, and that was back in 2022. At that point, okay, well, it might not drop all the way there, but it might drop to like $45. Okay, well, basically you're telling it, okay, I don't want to buy it now, but basically send me an email once it reaches $45, right? And then they will basically send you a notification. There you go. So unless you were planning on going rollerblading tomorrow, that's something that you can kind of plan way ahead and save quite a bit of money in the process. Again, $9 is not a huge deal, but percentage-wise, $9 on a $50 purchase, that ends up being substantial. Okay, and even if you don't want to buy the stuff on Amazon, this is the beauty. Those cycles, I closed at this point already, but those cycles, especially for stuff like skincare products or general personal care products, if you're looking at deodorant, shampoo, that sort of stuff, there's only a handful of manufacturers on the planet, and they tend to own a whole bunch of those other companies. And there's a 6 to 12 week sales cycle that most manufacturers have. So they will basically have something on sale, right? Every 6 to 12 weeks. So if you need some deodorant right now, okay, buy yourself one, but then maybe 6 to 12 weeks from now, there's likely going to be a sale at some point. And those sales, when they're on, they won't be only on Amazon, they will also be at other stores. So if you don't want to use Amazon, at least you can use Amazon for the price tracking info. And there's a high probability that that same item will also be on sale elsewhere. It might not be as cheap as at Amazon, but it'll still be discounted compared to the regular price. So for those of you that don't want to buy stuff from Amazon on principle, great. But you can still use this tracker to have a vague idea of roughly when things might be on sale elsewhere without having to check every single website. Okay? And then finally, here you can also negotiate
Alex,
prices.
You're doing such a great job. No one's asking questions.
Okay.
You're doing such a great job. Yeah.
Unless I put everyone to sleep already, I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
That's not the case.
You're doing really great. I put the camel.com in the Q&A, so you have the links right away, but they're all in Alex's presentation.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. So now this website here, so tanguay-l'entrepôt.ca, whenever you see things like entrepot like this, you're likely going to get a better deal than elsewhere, right? So what is this website? So this website, they tend to essentially get brand new furniture from Breuer Martineau and a few other suppliers. So what happens, but these tend to be last year's model. So let's say when Breuer Martineau, which is a local Quebec furniture chain, right? Or, a whole bunch of other ones. But again, Breuer Martineau is the primary one that they typically deal with. Every year or twice a year, they come up with new fridges and they come up with new bed frames. And, because people like the latest thing. If you're okay with a brand new 1-year-old fridge, you might be able to get a substantial discount by buying it here, right? And also, a lot of stores tend to also sell their floor models at a discount, right? The models that they have in stock when everyone walks around Best Buy and you check out a computer, you check out a washing machine or whatever it is that they have that you want to buy, right? Those floor models, obviously, people have opened and closed them and opened and closed them. So some of them might have a few scratches, a few dings, but they still work perfectly fine, right? But because now you're buying the floor model, you might get like a 20-30% off that item, right? So places like this where basically they're selling last year's model and then you're buying the floor model from last year's model, you might get a 50+% off just because you're buying a fridge that has a bit of a ding on the side that will be facing the wall anyway, based on depending on how your kitchen is set up, right? Now, most apartments, when you're renting stuff like fridges and washing machines, dryers, are either already included, or you might have a laundry room in the building, and then obviously your fridge and stove and dishwasher might already be included. But again, depends on the living arrangements. I'm just giving you examples there. Okay. Another fun way of saving quite a bit of money on this is if you buy, especially if you're buying a washer dryer combo. That's the way I bought mine. If it's the same model, but some of them have like mine are front loaders, so both the dryer and the washer, they open in the front instead of on top. The sort of the opening, the circular opening, right? One of them has a chrome finish. The other one has a white finish. They're the same model, just one was chrome, the other one was white, and so they're considered a mismatched pair. Personally, I really couldn't care less for the color of, they're literally a set. Even if they weren't a set, I wouldn't care. But like they're literally a set. It's just the colors are off. So because they're mismatched, I got them 60% off essentially. So I'm like, all right, I don't mind. And the reason I'm pointing this out, obviously, you're only going to buy a washer and dryer once every 10, 15 years, if not, right? Or, or what have you. But, they're a few $100s. So saving 50%, 60%, or, only buying them when they're on sale, that's an excellent way of saving quite a bit, right? So in a way, sometimes you can negotiate, can be like, oh, well, here, if I'm buying maybe one more thing, what if can I get like free delivery if they don't offer free delivery and whatnot? But other times, if you don't like the negotiating, and depending on what country you're from, in some countries, it's normal. Like you never pay the price that is advertised. That's the start. That's the opening bid. If you've ever been to any bazaars in the Middle East or in India, no one pays the price advertised. Like that's the price where you start negotiating, and then you're trying to pull it lower, and then they keep on trying to okay, I'll lower but not as much, etc., etc., etc. Again, in the Western countries, in Canada, people have sort of forgotten the art of negotiation. You can typically do this at a flea market, at a garage sale. In places like this are more likely, but I would definitely encourage you. Yes, you cannot negotiate. I mean, you can kind of negotiate food, but that's usually if you're using a specific app, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. But otherwise, people are just used to just paying the upfront cost. I already mentioned, increase your income over time. Obviously, as I alluded to earlier, right now you might be making a certain amount. When you're graduating, you might be making more, and then hopefully you will be getting different promotions over the years, and you'll be making more. Now, the key there is the more you're making, the more you should be saving as well. So let's say you're increasing your income by, I don't know, $10,000 in a year because you got a small promotion, right? Or maybe $50,000 per year. Well, in the $10,000 case, okay, maybe increase your savings by 2,000, 3,000, whatever you think is reasonable, right? Sure, I'm not saying put everything in savings because you're like, well, I'm working harder, I deserve a bit more. Okay, fine. But the earlier you start saving and investing, the easier it'll be later on. Remember, initially, I told you, you trade your time, right, for money. Eventually, right, your money will give you back time, because that's sort of the goal in a way. Once you have sufficient amount of money that you're investing, that is able to generate income on its own, right? Well, then it gives you back your time, because then it is up to you. If you love working 80 hours a week because that's what drives you, you're doing something that you're incredibly passionate about, all the more to you. Go work as many hours a week as you want. Elon, for example, for the lovely person he is, and how many people like or hate him, that's a different story. But he's the world's richest person, and regardless of how much you loathe him or love him, I think everyone can agree that he works crazy hours. I'm not saying he's doing good or bad things when he's working, but he's definitely active, shall we say, a lot of times. He's clearly not doing it because he needs the money at this point. I personally don't think so anyway, right? So you can be the world's richest person and be obsessed with work and ignore your family, right? Again, to each their own, not judging. But for some people, that work-life balance might be a bit more important than that. So it's good to have the option. If you want to work 100 hours a week, cool. If you have to work 100 hours a week, that's stressful, right? If the only way you can afford your lifestyle is to work 80 hours, 100 hours a week, then is it really worth it? Like, think about it, right? Anyway, um, again, be careful with lifestyle inflation. And sometimes, again, try to counteract the ads that you were getting all the time. So avoid needless upgrades, avoid wasteful spending. These two links here for each one of them, those are YouTube documentaries here. The first one talks about how people are made to upgrade their electronics and way too often, right? So then we end up with landfills of basically discarded electronics that can still probably be used. Or a lot of times what we tend to do, Canada is so progressive with this one, we tend to ship our garbage or used electronics to third world nations, and then they're stuck with all the toxic the toxic leaching from the batteries and from the things that aren't properly recycled. Again, that, don't believe me, just watch those two documentaries if you want to learn more about it. And the same thing applies also to the sort of disposable clothing industry. If you're looking at stuff that you can buy on Shein and Temu and all those other things, again, I'm not saying never buy stuff there. It's just sometimes spending a little bit more on an item that you can actually wear for maybe a couple of seasons instead of just something that will rip after 3 wears because it's made of such cheap material. And then you end up with so much garbage, and not only are you wasting your money, but we also end up polluting either our local backyard, but more often we tend to ship these things to South America, to Asia, to Africa. And again, don't take it from me, just watch these documentaries. They're quite eye-opening if you are unaware of this. And again, some of you might be coming from those countries. You might have you might have seen that in person in terms of the waste that is being caused by again, Canada's not the biggest polluter and biggest culprit of this, but we definitely contribute to it. So it's both more beneficial for your budget, but also for the planet as a whole, I would say, to be more conscious in terms of how you're spending your money. And then obviously clearly invest for the long term. Obviously, I don't have the time today to go into the investing, but that's that entire series in the fall if you want to have a look at it. Okay, so here's a very quick sort of sample budget that I'm going to give you very quickly. This is not a perfect budget. Obviously, the prices, the expenses will be very different from person to person. So on the very, very top here, you see these are your school fees. So those of you that are unsure yet in terms of how much your school fees are going to be, basically you can go to this subsection of the McGill website. If you can share that with the students, Caroline, that would be great. So again, all of the links are integrated into the slide, into the slides anyway. But I'm just saying, if anyone wants to check it out now, there you go. And you select whether you're an international student, Quebec resident, or non-Quebec Canadian, and you'll see exactly what and then you select your program. You'll see exactly what your cost will be. So, for example, if we're going with full-time PhD for international for the fall, you see here your tuition costs are going to be essentially 21,000 and change, right? So yeah, 21,700 roughly, right? Because between the fall and the winter semester, and keep in mind there was like a $15,000, remember, $15,000 or $17,000 thereabouts. That differential fee waiver if you qualify for it. So you can significantly reduce your fees for that. And obviously, if you're a Quebec student, you can see here that's about $5,000. Okay, and it's broken down over there. All right, so here I'm taking someone that is earning $25,000 per year, and they're basically a Quebec resident, just roughly $5,000 in school fees. Okay, so that means they have a $1,667.67 to spend per month. Okay, and here their goal is to save 5% of their income. The experts are recommending saving 10%. Again, I'm going to tell you this. As a student, that's unrealistic in most cases, okay? Even if it's only 1% or $5 or whatever per month or $1 a month, any amount is a good amount to start with. I see the hand. What we're gonna do, just because I've been talking quite a bit here. I maybe we can leave the Q&A until the end, just because I need to catch up. I'm a bit like on like 7 slides behind where I would like to be at this point. I'm just gonna go a bit faster now, just to wrap it up within the next 16 minutes that we still have left over, and then we can do Q&A afterwards, if that's okay. Okay. All right. So sorry if I cannot take the question just now. Just I want to make sure that we cover the key takeaways first. Okay. All
And
right,
I'm answering some in the Q&A privately with links. So if you want to try that, I may be able to help. Okay.
Okay, awesome. So again, this person, I'm just putting 5% here just for this person, right? Put whatever it is for you. Maybe for you, it's I want to have a budget that I'm not in a budget deficit. In other words, I want to make sure I'm not losing more money every month and I'm not spending more than I'm earning, right? So to each their own, right? So now the easiest way to make sure that you're able to stick to that plan is, as I said, track your expenses for a month. And I'll show you the slide on literally the next slide, the spreadsheet on the next slide. Track it for a month. Then you essentially, after you did this, you look at, okay, how much have I spent on this? Then you can kind of distribute that in the different subcategories. And then you can basically adjust it for the next month. Obviously, the first month that you're doing this, you're not necessarily going to know how much money you're going to be spending, especially if you haven't moved to Montreal yet. You're still in your home country. You won't necessarily know how much you're actually going to be spending on food, for example. Or you might not have secured a place yet. You might not necessarily know what your rent is currently, right? So as I said, like you may not be able to create a budget just yet, but you definitely will be able to do it once you are in Montreal, once your living situation has been sorted out, right? So as I mentioned before already, again, shelter is usually 30 to 35%. Again, these are examples. I'm not telling you this is how much it should be. I'm just saying if this is your income, right? If you're assuming this is the person that you are, obviously adjust these numbers for your own situation. This is how much they're spending it on, right? So in this person's case, their heating is electrical, so there's no natural gas. Some places will also have a natural gas bill because maybe your either your heating or your stove might be with gas. Again, depending on where you live. Other places, again, electricity is very, very cheap in Quebec, right? It's one of the cheapest rates in North America. It's one of fairly reasonable rates globally. So electricity is cheap, right? So that's going to not be that expensive. Again, rent, honestly, the only way you can get rent in this price range these days, unfortunately, is to basically live with someone, whether that's a significant other and they pay half and you pay half, or whether that's, having a couple of roommates. Because finding a rent that is around $670 for a bachelor, like for your own apartment, unless you're going like really far off island, that's going to be virtually impossible. That's just reality. Okay. I'm not saying it's for sure impossible, that you'll have a hard time finding something this cheap. Okay. So this is more assuming that you're living with someone, whether that's a boyfriend, girlfriend, what have you, or maybe 2 or 3 of you are renting out a 4-bedroom apartment or something like that. I don't know. Okay. It'll be less expensive on a per person basis. Now, here's those 2 links to the Government of Quebec website. So here they talk about assigning a lease, and how that works. If you have joint tenancy, what are the lease agreements, what to do if you're moving before the lease ends, what are some of again, there's many different subsections here that I'd highly encourage you to have a look at. Again, I'm not going to go through them today, but have a look at them. There was a session on, I believe, May 15th, if memory serves. McGill, you can access that by going on the very last slide. There's a link from the CLE website in the subsection. I think it's mcgill.ca/get ready. And then on the top left corner, they'll have something along the lines of webinars. And that particular webinar, I believe, that particular webinar was for undergrads, I believe. But again, rental applies to you as well. Okay, so and the recording is there. So I'd highly encourage you to have a look. They also talk about a few more things around leasing. But I'm literally giving you the legal. Here are how leases work, and these are the subsections of your rights and obligations. In Quebec, it's called the Régie du Logement. That's basically the government entity that oversees leasing. Okay, as long as you're renting out a house or an apartment that is 5 years or older, right? The Régie du Logement governs those. Okay, and there's limits in terms of how much. There's very strict limits in terms of how much your landlord can increase your rent by. If you're trying to rent a place that is less than 5 years old, then the rent can spike by more than what the regie controls. So I'd highly encourage you not to rent something that is less than 5 years old, because then you might have a much bigger spike in rental costs. Okay. So just something to be aware of. Okay. But even in those cases, typically landlords are not too unreasonable, but just if you want to be on the safe side. They also talk about, in what cases could you get kicked out of your, for the owner to repossess your house, the landlord to repossess the apartment. Now, obviously, if you're renting directly from an individual, that's a possibility. But again, the law is very pro-tenant. In other words, you can definitely delay that by a lot, but there's certain instances where they could do this. What are rights and obligations surrounding pets, excessive noise, all those things, right? What if major work needs to be done? What are the obligations for joint tenants? When do you have to pay the rent by? All of those things, okay? What types of pets are allowed? So again, typically, if you're renting the place from a large building, literally the entire building is for rent, a lot of the potential issues that you might have with individual owners disappear, okay? Personally, right now, my wife and we rent a house, okay? This from an individual. Now, the reason we're renting a house is because this house costs about $1.1 million if I was to buy it in Ottawa, okay? Luckily, houses are a bit less expensive in Montreal, not by much. So I live in Ottawa these days. But in our case, it makes more sense currently because basically the mortgage would have to be about twice as much as what we're paying in rent in this particular configuration. Attend my sessions on housing in the fall if you want to learn more about the math behind that. Okay, but yeah, so very useful little website. I'd highly encourage you to have a look at it. Now, cell phone plans. So planhub.ca over here allows you to compare and contrast many different types of cell phone plans. You can compare your mobile plans and your internet plans. Okay, so you can use this. Mention if you're bringing your own device, or if you want the device to be included. Go through the basic search again. Do you want a cell phone plan? Okay, so you want a cell phone plan. Obviously make sure to select the correct province because different providers are available in different provinces. And let's say if you don't have a provider, you're like, well, I don't have any. And what are you looking for? How many minutes? Okay, well, let's say you're looking at unlimited. Are you looking at limited? Are you looking at, just Canada wide? Are you looking at also international sometimes? Let's say you're just looking at that. How many gigs of data would you like? I don't know, like 10. I'm just making stuff up here. Obviously, pick your own thing. Typically, if you already have a phone and you bring your phone with you, you can save $5 to $10 a month typically on most plans, but not always. And here they'll give you some examples of what are some of sort of the best deals currently out there. Now, some cell phone providers, because a lot of times students will ask me, well, Alex, what do you use? Personally, I use Fizz. One thing I'd like about Fizz that the other ones don't have is that Fizz, whatever plan you're getting, any unused data carries forward for 2 months. So let's say if you're getting a 60 gig plan, right? And you're only using 10 gigs per month. The first month you have 60 gigs and you're using 10, right? But then the 50 you didn't use get moved to the next month. So next month you're going to have 60 plus 50. So you have 110. Next month you're only using 10 again. So now you have 50 plus 50, that's 100. Third month you have 60 plus 100. So now you have 160. So my point is, therefore, with something like Fizz, you can go for a much smaller plan, a much cheaper plan that only has 20 gigs of data or 10 gigs of data, and you're getting way more data as well, right? So that's personally why I'm using Fizz. But again, do your own research, figure out which ones you want. And if you are going with, looking at this website, click on, viewing the offer. A lot of times there might be things like this, referral codes. And if you don't find one, let's say you're looking at Fido over there. Takes a little while. Okay. No, this is redirecting me straight to Fido. Sorry, I click on the details here. So on the details section, then you have like a Q&A option at the bottom usually if you're going for the review. Where is it? To read see other results. Hold on. Okay, I cannot find it right now, but if you look, there will be literally like a post where basically you can post comments. Like they moved it. It used to be like right next to this. They redesigned this slightly since last semester. But it should still be there. Usually people will also post their referral codes. I've included mine in just only if you're going to go with Fizz, just because sometimes some of these codes may or may not work. The one that I've included works for sure. But again, please do your own research, figure out which one works for you. And if you have a friend that uses Fizz, please use their referral. You don't have to use mine. I just included it because sometimes students will be like, "Oh, Alex, can you just give me yours?" Because I know for sure that one works. But yeah. So transportation, Opus. So this here breaks down. So notice that this is from July 1st of last year. Okay. So usually in July, not every year, but most years on July 1st, they tend to update the costs for the bus pass. So the bus pass probably will go up a little bit. Again, when you're a student, it's $60. If you're getting it for 4 months in a row, you save a little bit. But again, you have to buy it well in advance. So again, have a look at this just to give you an idea of roughly how much the public transit is. But as I said, these prices may become null and void on July 1st. But again, they don't have the info yet, so that's the latest info that they have over there. If you're going to get a car, obviously, here's the subsection of the SAAQ. That's the Quebec auto insurance. So it's Société de l'Assurance Automobile du Québec. So that's like in the Quebec auto insurance, the government auto insurance body. So you have to pay your license fee, your driver's license fees, as well as your car registration fees to them. You can find a bit more information about it in case you're wondering how much it costs, how it works, blah, 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 all that stuff. And same thing with registration. That's also a section on their website over there. This other little website / app is a very useful little one that allows you to compare and contrast gas prices. Okay, what is wrong with the connection? Is top notch over there. I'm not sure why it's going a bit slow. So obviously, don't drive halfway across Montreal just to save 2 cents on gas. But this is especially useful if you're going on a road trip and you're going to be driving past that place anyway, right? So if let's say you're living downtown right now and you're living close to this gas station that costs $1.55 and you're visiting a friend that is on the South Shore and lives here, well, look, as long as you have enough gas to get from here to here, well, it's 149.9 over there versus 155. So you're saving 6 cents per liter, right? You have a tank of 50 liters. That's not insubstantial. Like you save $2-3 per tank. If you fuel up 2-3 times a month, that adds up pretty quickly. Okay. Obviously, there's other apps out there, but that's one of the ones that one of the websites that I use. The app is a bit laggy, but just the website is fine. Again, on food, that's usually how these are the percentages that people use on. Again, I'll show you in the next few slides the info where you can find those different apps. Clothing and gadgets, again, that's typically people. So the percentages that you see here, that's how much people typically use in those categories. The average Canadian only saves about 5.7% of their income. Again, the experts are recommending 10, so you can see people are only saving half as much as what's recommended. So that's not great. Now, this is probably going to be your best friend because this little card, so the Access Montreal card, costs about $8 a year, and it gives you substantial discounts that can be combined with your student discounts on many different activities all across the city. Okay. So you can see here they have multiple partners. They have over 70 different partners. So for example, Montreal has these Bixi bikes that you can rent, either get a monthly subscription or a yearly subscription or just rent it as you go, and you get different discounts depending on what you're getting with this. They will have different, so there's many different different events and that you can get substantial discounts with this. So I'd highly encourage you. It's definitely worth the $8 a year cost. Okay. Also, if you renew the card for more than one person at the same address, the second and third person will get it at $7 per year. Just the first person that pays $8 basically. So it's one more way to save a bit of money there. And then obviously insurance costs will vary quite a bit over there. And then obviously if you're getting a cashback rewards card, that will give you like 2% on groceries. Yeah, I already mentioned that as an example earlier. All right, so here's that free spreadsheet. And just because I kind of ran a bit over time, lucky for you, I made a 7 or 8 minute video 2 years ago here that literally walks you through how to use this website. It's like a 7-8 minute video. You can pause it. You can do whatever you want on there. Literally showing you exactly how to use this spreadsheet, breaking it down in a lot of detail. So I was hoping to be able to show it today, but again, I went a bit over time. Is it okay if we maybe stick around for an extra 5 minutes just so I wrap up the last few slides? Okay. So again, apologies for going a bit over time there. Sometimes I dive a bit too deep in the. I forget that this is supposed to be a 2 hour session. My normal budgeting session is 2 hours. I keep on forgetting that when I'm doing it for orientation, it's 90 minutes, not 2 hours. So okay. So very quickly here, this is a tool from the FCAC. Remember, that's that agency from the Canadian government that allows you to find sort of the best savings accounts in Canada, right? And again, luckily for you, I have another, I think it's 5-minute video that shows you exactly how to use that one. Again, this was in case I go over time. I already recorded these videos a couple of years ago, so you can watch them there, okay? And obviously, if you already are happy with that, you don't need one, then that's fine, okay? And here's also a another one that basically shows you very similar, but this one allows you to compare and contrast different credit cards with different features. And this one basically shows you this video here. Same idea. It's like under 10 minutes long, shows you how to use that website. Okay. Whatever bank you end up opening an account with, make sure that they are a member of the CDIC, whether it's a credit union or a bank. So the CDIC is the Canadian Depository Insurance Corporation. It's a regulator. So on the off chance that your bank or financial institution goes under, or for whatever reason, they have to shut down, your money is protected up to $100,000 by the federal government. Okay. So there is zero reason for you to open a bank account in Canada with an institution that is not a member of CDIC. Okay. So make sure 99% of them are members of CDIC. It's only the sketchy ones that aren't. So please make sure that you're not opening an account with a sketchy one. All the big Canadian banks are obviously members here. So, TD, RBC, BMO, Scotiabank, CIBC, National Bank, Desjardins, right? All of those are, but also online banks like, Tangerine, etc. All of them are. So here you have the full list of all the banks that are members, okay? Every single one of them, whether they're a tiny online bank or a big established one that has been around for 100 plus years in they have thousands of locations across Canada, anyone that is a member of CDIC has the exact same coverage, okay? And this explains exactly how those deposits are insured. So have a look at that. So this talks more about the differential fee waiver. I told you in advance that this is a much, text heavier slide. So have a look at it. And I go into more detail about this in the fall semester if you're interested. I'd highly also encourage you to have a look at the Scholarships and Student Aid Office. They might have some interesting things there. And they also have, those of you that are struggling with, once you're trying to figure out your budget on your own, let's say if you're noticing that you're still sort of in a deficit and you cannot make your budget work for you, they offer free consultation. So I'd highly encourage you to get a student aid at McGill.ca. I'd highly encourage you to call them up at this number to book a session with them. Okay, but first, again, try it by yourself. Again, track your expenses for a month, see how you're doing. I'm just saying, if you notice that you're struggling and you're not able to make ends meet, have a chat with them. They might be able to help you out there. Or again, you can send me an email and I gladly meet with you one-on-one on Zoom as well. But again, I'm not a licensed financial advisor or anything like that. Whereas they typically will have people that might be a bit more licensed if you're into that sort of thing. Okay. So ways to save on groceries is very important, again, to distinguish between needs. And once again, maybe two more minutes and I'll wrap up here. Just have a couple more slides that I wanted to cover. The other ones, again, are sort of bonuses for later on. So distinguish between needs and wants. Something that you need is essential, right? We all need a safe place to sleep at night, whether it's a gigantic mansion or a tiny apartment. It's still, as long as it's safe and it's yours, you can safely stay there. That sort of qualifies, right, as meeting that need. Wants are nice to haves, right? Do you really need a brand new iPhone or the latest Google Pixel or whatever that costs $1,300 plus tax? Probably not. Could you get away with a $200, $150 phone if the basic is like, okay, I need a cheap, reliable phone? You can probably get by with a cheap, reliable phone, right? If you have the extra money, sure, buy yourself the fanciest phone that you can, if that's what you're into. I'm just saying there's a difference between the need for a phone and the need for having basic internet, right, to be able to do that, and the want of having the fanciest, most expensive thing. So again, a lot of these, I'm not going to mention them out right now because they're not important, but because a lot of the stuff you're probably already doing. So those that are interested can read the slide. But essentially, have a look at So yeah, these are some YouTube videos, not from me, but from I think this is from the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. They're talking about sort of sneaky ways that manufacturers and retailers will try to persuade you to buy the more expensive things. So again, watch it's like a half an hour video. I'd encourage you to have a look at it. There's also wholesalers. Costco obviously requires a membership. If you're buying enough things, the membership might be worth the savings. But you can also go to places like Food Bound Triple that don't require a membership. And as long as you have the space to store the stuff in bulk that you're buying and it doesn't go bad, canned food or whatever it is that you're buying that you can buy in large amounts, that's another way to save quite a bit. Again, that's an obvious thing. If you're buying stuff in bulk, you'll save on a per gram basis, right? Also try to buy generics, buy ibuprofen or acetaminophen instead of Advil/Tylenol respectively, right? Tylenol is the same thing as acetaminophen, ibuprofen is the same thing as Advil. You'll save substantially if you're buying it, the other one. Now, the last three things that I want to mention. Number one, the Flip app, useful little app that you can use that essentially allows you to scan products as long as the exact same product, the same brand in the same shape, size, container is available on sale elsewhere. Virtually all large retailers in Canada have agreed to match the price. So let's say you're shopping at IGA and Maxi happens to have the same bag of potatoes from the same from the same farm, from the same from the same maker, farmer, the exact same size bag, the same brand, same everything. If that one's 10% off or 5% off elsewhere, they will match that for you. Okay. So, and obviously you can do it the old fashioned way and, look at coupons online, but that's so much more time consuming than just, using the app, going in store, and you're essentially scanning everything that you're putting in your cart. And if anything is on sale at any retailer, that will create a discount code for you. Then when you're going to checkout, just tell the cashier, it's like, okay, here are the items that I bought. And by the way, this many of those items are on sale. Here's the app, and they basically just scan the coupon code for you. Okay. And again, that price matching works on the large retailers, less so on the small corner stores. Okay. But the large retailers or all the big ones will typically do it. Okay. I already mentioned that 6 to 12 week sales cycle, that price tracking website. And again, Kijiji, Craigslist are fine for used items. I'd be careful if you're looking at rentals there. You might find really good deals, but just make sure that the rental is real. Okay. The account stuff is fine. Okay. So here, one other way of saving on rental. So you can, on groceries. So number one is using the Flip app. Number two is those of you that shop at Loblaws, Provigo, Maxi, or independent grocer, all those stores are owned by the Loblaws Corporation, the same large retailer. And they have these credit cards. They're called President's Choice credit cards. They're sort of affiliated with them. And President's Choice is a separately run bank owned by Loblaws. So essentially, if you sign up again using your junk email account, if you sign up for their coupons, you're going to get about once a month, once every 2-3 weeks, you're going to get some of these codes. So this is obviously from last September. So you get one of these codes that basically, if you're ordering, spend at least $75 online, and you get 20,000 points. The way it works is 1,000 points converts into $1. Plus, then you're earning points when you're spending money on anything else in the store. And sometimes they give you also bonus points here on some of those items. So just to give an idea here, I bought 25 different items online, purchased them online. That gave me the 20,000 points here because obviously $96 is more than 75. You see the taxes, by the way, in Canada, taxes only apply to items that are sort of considered processed. So a lot of food items that aren't processed foods won't have any taxes, both provincial or federal. Okay. Sometimes there's a pickup fee, sometimes there's no pickup fee. Again, this depends. It depends from store to store. Okay. This was the estimated cost. This was the final cost. You can see here there was like within 1 cent the estimate. And notice, it cost me $96. Loyalty, that means I redeemed 50,000 points from a previous purchase for $50. So that $96 price tag became $46. So I pretty much saved half of it. Then, so you see 50,000 points redeemed. $20,000, sorry, 20,000 points that I acquired from this 20,000 point bonus. I acquired another 10,000 points because of the items that I bought, plus these extra digital offers, like you can see here, they add up. So I basically got another 37,000 points. So I spent 50,000 points. I earned 37,000 points, and now I have 41,000 points left over. So you can typically convert these in 10,000 point or 20,000 point increments. So next time I go shopping, I can basically convert $40 worth of these points again. So one easy way to literally cut your grocery bill in half would be to use something like this. Okay. So that, and the last one to save, this is another app called Flash Food. There's more and more stores that are members of this Flash app. So the way this works is that all the member stores will have a little fridge that is like this, or a pickup section at the front of their store. You're using the app, you're prepaying for the item using the app. Some of the items that are on the app is maybe stuff that they ordered a too large amount of, or items that are nearing expiry. So if, let's say, especially for meat products, if they're within a day or 2 days of expiry, they rather give you a 50% or 20% discount and make sure that they're not throwing it away, right? Because in Canada, you're not allowed to sell expired products. Even if it's perfectly safe and legal to eat, as long as if it says it's expired, they have to toss it. Canada wastes so much food that just ends up in the landfill. It's really saddening, right? So using, and you're like, but Alex, I don't want to buy meat that is about to go bad in a day. If you're cooking tonight, why does it matter if it goes bad? If they're no longer allowed to sell it tomorrow or in 5 days from now, if you're cooking it tonight anyway, right? And you can literally
and actually,
say
Alex, it doesn't say expired. It says best before.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Best before.
Right?
Yes, I'm just saying legally. Yeah, my point is legally they cannot sell it to you after that. And if and sometimes like even ridiculous stuff will have an expiry date. Salt, right? Before it was salt, spent millions of years in an underground salt mine somewhere, unless you're buying sea salt. But even that spent millions of years in the sea. And now all of a sudden you're telling me that by June 15th this year, that salt goes bad now, right? It makes no sense for some of those items. So the point is they're not allowed, whether it's shampoo, whether it's whatever it is, they're not allowed to sell it after the expiry or best by date, right? So this is another way to save a lot. But again, it's not every retailer that will be available here, but all you have to do is basically just click on this. It'll bring you to their website, check out your area, find out again, because I'm in Ottawa, it gives me Ottawa stuff right now, but it'll geolocate you, and there's more and more stores that have this. Again, it's typically the large ones. Again, last little thing, those of you that need to buy a car, this slide and the next slide talks about alternatives and things to look at. This is included just for your personal information because most students don't buy a car, but if you have to buy one or you want to buy one, these are some key things to look out for. I'm giving you examples here. You can read through these two slides on your own. And so here's last thing, the telecom providers. So there's one of the main reasons why telecom is so expensive in Canada is because we don't have that many different companies, and there's more companies than you would think, but they're owned by there's only like 4 different companies that own pretty much everything else, right? So Rogers, that's the premium brand. TELUS, premium brand. Bell, premium brand. Videotron is mostly premium brand, but mostly locally to Quebec and part of Ontario. Then each one of them have their discount versions, right? So Fido is owned by Rogers, Koodo is owned by TELUS, Virgin is owned by Bell, Freedom is owned by Videotron. So those are the discounted brands, but they're running on those specific networks. And finally, you have the fighter brands, which Chatter is the cheapest brand that, the cheapest deals that Rogers has, and that's via the Chatter branded one. Public is TELUS, Lucky is Bell, and then Fizz is Videotron, okay? So if you want to get the best deals, look at these brands down here. Whether it's Chatter, Public, Lucky, or Fizz, you're pretty much guaranteed to get the best deals at those levels. If you're someone who uses like 500 gigs or whatever, like ridiculous amounts of data, sometimes the bigger brands will have a better deal. But like for 20 gigs a month, 30 gigs a month, 10 gigs a month, the best deals will be down here. Again, personally, I use Fizz. Whatever, do your research. That's why I gave you that website. Find out whatever works best for you. Okay. And the exact same thing also applies for internet providers. Right now I use Bell. The reason I use Bell is because I got like a 75% discount because they had screwed up something. They basically cut my line by mistake and took a bit too long to do it. So to make me happy, instead of paying $140 a month, I'm getting basically their $140 1.5 gig connection at like 60, like with tax and everything is like $62. But I don't think that'll last very long. But right now I'm with Bell just because they gave me a ridiculously good offer. Again, Ontario prices are different. In Quebec, you might be able to find something even cheaper. It's a bit more expensive in Ontario, generally speaking. My parents
Alex, I
live
think
in,
we got to
yes.
speed up here.
Yeah,
We're
yeah, no,
15
I'm
minutes
literally, this is the last
over.
thing. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm literally like wrapping up. So,
So it's such good information.
yeah, yeah. But again, this is all details. So you can use that same Plan Hub.ca again to compare and contrast the home internet providers as well. eBox is owned by Bell. Okay, so it's the Fighter brand equivalent of, but for home internet providers. Very, very high speeds for very cheap. Again, I don't use them. That's literally my dad's referral code because he ends up using them. Again, you can look on their website. You can find many other referral codes. I'm just including here if that's what you want to use, but please do your own research. Those might not be the best ones for you. Again, they give you $25 off normally, and they have like right now a thing that ends I think on June 8th where they double that. Again, so we're not gonna have time to do this one, unfortunately. I do have I think well, I'll have something on my website kind of comparing this. The whole point of this is you can use this credit card payment calculator to figure out how to pay your credit card a bit faster. If you're just adding $5 extra a month into your minimum payment, you'll basically save, instead of taking 10 years to pay it off, just adding your extra $5 a month, you basically save 4 years worth of interest charges, which is crazy. Again, this is covered in that session in the fall, and same thing with these. I had included them in case we had a time, but this is technically part of the credit and debit credit scores system session. This also tells you basically how to improve your credit score. Again, didn't have the time to cover it today. There's a series in the fall that talks about this. There's literally a 2-hour session of talking about a whole bunch of these things. I will have some shorter videos coming up on YouTube on my channel. It's a tiny channel, nothing massive, that you might be able to get that before the fall if interested. So in closing, budgeting is an important first step on the road to financial stability. I know I didn't talk too much about the budgeting itself in terms of how the strategic, and I have that short video. Watch it, please. Because again, most people just look at budgeting and they like, oh, I'm budgeting, I'm doing right. It's like, I'm doing everything right. Yes, you're doing everything right, but now what do you do with the savings? It's crazy how much you can still mess up if you then don't take those savings to use them properly. So probably budgeting can help you achieve both short and long-term goals. I think that's fairly obvious. Once you have a positive cash flow, so in other words, you make more money than you're earning, it's important to set up a financial plan and be like, hey, what are my goals? Do I want to buy a car? Do I want to buy a house? Do I want to travel the world? What do I want to do? And how am I going to be able to achieve this? Again, and this is just a compound interest calculator. Again, I don't have time to show it to you today, but have a look at some of those videos coming up. And here's the series in the fall. There's no dates set for them yet, but this is the 10 webinar series. Those are, if you don't want to learn more about all these things, I cover, how to file your tax, all that stuff in those slides. And here's the link to the YouTube channel. As I said, there's not much on there for now, but I'll add a few more videos soon. Oh, sorry.
Well, Alex, I posted your 3 videos that were in the presentation.
Perfect.
I posted the link to the skills,
Awesome.
the skill set too. So just
here
look
we
in
go.
the Q&A, guys. So
Yes.
I'm just going to do a quick conclusion, and then we'll stop the video and maybe we could take some questions. Does that work,
Yes,
Alex?
of course. Hey, again, I can
Okay,
stick around for as long as possible. Again, apologies again for going over time.
I'm going to be super fast. So thanks for joining. If you found this useful, we have other webinars that you might find useful. I posted a couple links for the Get Ready website, the webinars, the McGill Essentials, where you'll find videos on other topics. And don't hesitate to reach out to Clay. If things weren't answered, you can book one-on-one appointments. We're here for you. And thank you, Alex.
You're very welcome.
Always a new tidbit for me too. So never lost. Happy to have been here with you guys.